Hi there, and welcome to part 2 of the paper 2 Edexcel history video. We're looking again at period and British depth studies, British America and Anglo-Saxons. This video looks at Anglo-Saxon and Normans, the depth study. Okay, so we've looked at the fact that it's an hour and 45 minutes. We've obviously looked at British America section A. We're now going to focus down here on section B, and we're going to look at describe two features for 5 minutes. Explain why for 15 minutes, and then how far do you agree with 30 minutes. It should give you a little bit of time at the end of the paper to flick through and have a look, but try and stick to it. Timing is really important, so really try and just stick to 5 minutes for that first question, and then you should be fine because you've only got 2 questions left on section B. So let's have a look at it. Anglo-Saxons and Normans. First question is describe two features of, in this case, it's the Witan. Here's the Witan right here. It's the council. It's arguably the earliest form of parliament in England. It was formed up of nobles and churchgoers, kind of like people that ran the church. These people would then advise the king. The Witan were very powerful because they could choose the next king, but they would also be able to advise on issues to do with foreign policy, trade, or big kind of complaints within the country. So they were the ones that helped advise who to send up to deal with the revolt against Tostig in 1065, for example. So it's asking you to talk about two features. So let's have a look. Feature 1. The Witan was a council of leading Saxon lords who made important decisions on foreign affairs or choosing the next king. Feature 2. The Witan gave advice to the king on lots of issues, such as helping the king make trade deals or in dealing with rebels. Where are you getting our points? It's a council of leading Saxons. They made important decisions on foreign affairs. The Witan gave advice to the king on lots of issues. So those issues, for example, are making trade deals. There's your 4 marks. Don't overcomplicate it, but at the same time, make sure it's super clear that you've made your first point, for example, made up of leading Saxons. Your second point, they gave advice. And then you want to expand upon it by just pushing it a bit further and saying what those leading councillors did or what advice they gave. There we go. For the second question, the B question, it says explain why. Remember, you want to make 3 points on this and you want to make 3 Peel points. The question says explain why William created the Marcher earldoms. Remember, here's a picture of the Marcher earldoms right here. There were 3 of them, the Marcher earldom of Chester, Shrewsbury and Hereford. And these were Marcher, basically means border region, so these were the border earldoms. That word is used in lots of different contexts in Europe as well, so it's not just England. But in our case, the Marcher earldoms were those 3. It gives you 2 already. Here they are: protecting borders and rewarding followers. You could talk about the fact that you're trying to protect the borders from the Welsh, these people over here, and rewarding followers because they were the ones that fought at Hastings. Then you've got a third point that you could make, and that could be on any point that you want to make, as long as it's related to why he created the Marcher earldoms. Here's our example. Notice I've used phrases like secondly, finally. This is telling me that that's point 2, and this one's telling me that that's point 3. So there's 2, and there is 3. So this one must be our first point. It just makes it really clear to the examiner what you're trying to say. So, William created the Marcher earldoms for a number of reasons, I've said there. Firstly, to protect his border against the threat of invasion from the Welsh. So there is my point, to protect against the Welsh. Point. Even before William came to power, the Welsh had been a threat to the kingdoms of Wessex and Mercia. Evidence. By creating the Marcher earldoms, William was giving power to 3 trusted nobles who would be able to build castles and fortify the area. They would use their earldoms to launch attacks into Welsh land. There's my explanation. So PEE. The fact that I'm coming back to this idea about what they were used for, so they would use their earldoms to do the following, that is my link back to the title. You could put a point in there to say how successful that was. That would also work as a link. So a level of success. Secondly, William created the Marcher earldoms as a means of rewarding loyal followers from the Battle of Hastings. So there's my point. The land on the border was vast and would allow the new Earls of Chester, Hereford and Shrewsbury to build their own fortified castles without the approval of the king, and to enlarge the population by encouraging more Normans to settle in this area. That's my evidence and my explanation, because it would enlarge the area. This would help with the redistribution of land and create more fierce presence for the Normans. So there's my link. This would help. Why is it important? Finally, another reason to create them was to increase the chances of receiving more taxation. So I've gone taxation as my third point. This would allow these regions to expand. It would encourage both Saxons and Normans to move to the area, increasing the size of the old burhs and the amount of revenue that they could get. This would mean more money available to spend on castle building. 3 very clear points. Point, evidence, explanation. Obviously have a look at that and when it comes to practicing your own. Oddly enough, we're here at the last question. So how far do you agree with the statement? We've seen these before. This is the 16 marker. There is no spag with this one. Only on the medicine do you have the spag. So let's have a look. So the question says, how far do you agree? The main reason William was able to keep control in these years, 1066 to 75, was the building of castles. It's a great question, because the question, you've got to break it down. How did he keep control in these years? So 1075 is the revolt of the Earls, when he obviously lost control of it. 1066 is the Battle of Hastings. So between Hastings and the revolt of the Earls, how did he keep control? There are so many reasons. He rewarded followers. He built the castles. He had the church take elements of control. Both of those points are there, look. Another way he kept control, the Domesday Book. The Domesday Book is a little bit later in this time period. You could also talk about how he kept control by rewarding followers. You could also talk about how he kept control because he was able to restructure the land and society. So it's given you 2. You obviously want to come up with your third point yourself, whichever one of those you want to go with. Right, so here's the example. Looks beefy. Obviously, I've typed it, but you've also got to bear in mind that when you write this yourself, you'll obviously get into the flow of it, and you'll end up coming with something slightly larger anyway. So straight away, we've got judgment. Always conclude the 16 markers. So in conclusions at the bottom. Then I've got an agree paragraph. Look, to agree with a statement, I've then hopefully gone with a disagree, which should be this one here. And then I've also said to also disagree. So I've gone agree, disagree, disagree. You just want to show a balance. So it doesn't matter whether you write 4 paragraphs. You really want to aim for 3, if not 4. So you could do 2 agree, 2 disagree. Doesn't matter as long as you've got a balance. So I started off with a very basic intro right up here. After the Battle of Hastings, William used several methods. So I'm saying that there are several ways that he kept control. One method was the design of the Motte and Bailey Castle. Another included the changes to the church, so the 2 they gave me for free. And I'm also then introducing my third, the establishment of the feudal system, which was much more important. There, I've given them my answer. Okay, so to agree with the statement, we can see that Motte and Baileys were built to terrify the local population and strike fear into their enemies. There's my point. This would prevent rebellions, as it would appear that the Normans were everywhere and had established their control and their commanding dominance of an area by building on top of mounds. There is my explanation and evidence, because I've said it was allowed them to be dominant, it allowed them to have a presence, and it would prevent rebellions that way. Another reason why the Motte and Bailey design allowed William to keep control was because he could station his cavalry in there, Norman cavalry, which could be used at any time to attack or defend. Another bit of evidence. However, although castles were useful at defending England from attack, the changes to the structure of society were more important. There's my L, look. I've come back to actually evaluating it. And believe me, they love judgments here. So there is a mini judgment. So I said I don't think it's that important. Right, next point then. I'm now disagreeing. The creation of the feudal system proves that keeping power was more about structures and hierarchy rather than physical castles. There's my point. William created a more rigid system of control where he was the main landowner and rich and wealthy land was distributed down to his followers. There's my evidence. This was different to Edward the Confessor, who found himself outnumbered by the Godwin family, who had taken possession of most land in England. That's a cracking little point there, comparing it to the previous system under the Saxons. Then I've given some evidence here, some explanation. The feudal system was a strong way of ensuring loyalty. Serfs were at the bottom, treated like slaves with little respect of moving up, and everybody owed military service. And then finally, I've said again, this was very important in keeping control, as it meant the king would always be in control, or would always have power over his subjects. There's my L. Last one. Lanfranc's changes allowed William to keep control. Boom, point. Here's my evidence. Lanfranc brought in many changes, such as not allowing priests to get married. There's my point. So there's the evidence. Advising the king more closely to write laws, as bishops and abbots were the only ones literate. There's some evidence. Lanfranc, as a senior church leader, could also act as regent. This suggests there was a great deal of power in changes made to the church, more so than a castle built to intimidate locals. Explanation, link. In conclusion, another judgment. William was able to keep control mainly due to the feudal system. It's repeating what I said right at the start, where I said the feudal system was more important. There is where I'm saying it again. Now I'm trying to say why, though, for that final conclusion. It gave power to senior leaders of the church, and nobles, which allowed them to build castles. So the feudal system allowed them to build these castles, which gave him more control. Without this tight control and authority, rebel earls could have seized power from the king, like in 1075 when Saxon and Norman lords tried to rebel. Therefore, the feudal system is most important. Hopefully, that gives you a strong idea of how to put together your 16 markers for the Anglo-Saxons, and I hope that the video has been useful. Good luck in the exams.